thumbnail sketching myself. I've always been a UFO-y kind of guy.
That's a good way to describe it.
Well, it's true. I grew up initially in South Florida, and back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was remember the Bermuda Triangle situation where it was big press there. Charles Berlitz wrote a book on it. And then there was another weird incident down there. You might remember a movie with Ernest Borgnine, The Ghost of Flight 401. Well, my father was a big engineer, electronics engineer in the area. When I was a teenager in that time, I asked him, is this just a bunch of baloney or is there something to it? And he said, I know you expect me to pour cold water on it and say it's all just a bunch of applesauce. But he said, no. See, what he did is he was as a volunteer basis, he was in charge of all the power squadron for the Coast Guard for the whole South Florida, which meant that he was in charge of hiring teachers for boating and all that. In the context of this, he had a lot of interplay with admirals, Coast Guard officials, and he promised me there was a lot of UFO activity, unusual phenomenology in South Florida. And I guess what I'm saying is that was my early insight into things not being the way they seem. And as a matter of fact, the Ghost of Flight 401 deal we lived on our same street with a lot of Eastern Airlines pilots who had actually seen this ghost. And so in other words, I got my baptism in that fashion. And most of my religious life, I was an Episcopalian. I did have one departure when I was in college. I was a student Methodist minister, but frankly, I was a little hard bitten for a minister, and my ex-wife said he had to leave, so I didn't. But to break the story, that's just, I'll give you a little thumbnail sketch of myself. And what happened was, about 5-6 years ago, I converted to Catholicism. And the boost to write this book was a very, very powerful and moving experience. I talked about it on that Coast to Coast show here in August. And what happened was I was interested in property in upstate New York. I went up there in September 2008. Real pretty area, if you've ever been up there. It's real sharp, right near the Adirondack State Park. Anyway, I was up there on this property buying expedition. I didn't buy it, but I did some sightseeing, did the Cooperstown Baseball Museum visit and so on. And I went to Our Lady of Martyrs Shrine in Orriesville, New York. Real pretty. It was a setting where it was all about a third or a quarter mile up, but like a mesa down for that. And what happened? I found these people just on the day I had set aside for sightseeing. I didn't plan on going to Catholic shrines. I just played tourist in general in the Mohawk Valley. And I said I was a Catholic, so I'll go check it out. Okay. Now I'm there about an hour and a half in total. But for the first 45 minutes, there was an overpowering, knock you down smell of roses. And as I was walking around. And I've been me long enough to know this is an unusual experience. I've got bad allergies here. Just because I was in New York a couple of days didn't make me free of it.
And I couldn't hear you. Can you talk a little louder?
Sure, I'll go this way. But I had bad allergies, and so in other words, I'm no bloodhound. And this was such a cloying, powerful smell that I knew I was experiencing something quite a bit different than normal. And what I did is I went to the museum up there in Orriesville, and I asked the lady, I said, look, I sell trees for a living. What have you got that's so fragrant here? And because this was something really just gripped you. And she looked at me in a stunned manner, and she said, you smelled it too? And I said, yeah, I guess. And what happened? Carol had been there 12 years, real competent woman, educated, running the museum. And she said every now and then somebody smells this, and what it's called is the odor of sanctity. Odor of sanctity. And it's a phenomenon that's associated with Catholic shrines, and not just Catholics, but to a large extent. And it's the smell of roses. And I knew I was experiencing something. She even showed me on the little map of the grounds where I probably smelled it, and says, this is where you smelled it the strongest? And I did. And where it was where one of the first rosaries in the country, that's a Catholic series of prayers, was said right there. And I thought, whoa. Because, at least thing, I was expecting anything except a nice visit. And like I said, this went on for a 45-minute period. And right after I talked to Carol, I just kind of walked around the grounds a little more, sat down on a bench up there. When you have an experience like this, it's like, it's gripping. I mean, I'm an old Army sergeant, a salesman. I'm not a real mild-mannered guy. You know, I've been in knife fights, all kinds of things. I mean, it's just had a rough life. But what I'm saying is, you know you've experienced something different. When you experience something like the paranormal, something divine, just whack across the face. So I was basically stunned. And I was basically moved too. And there were a couple other experiences connected with my conversion to Catholicism. And by the way, let me say this, before we get into the meat of this thing, this is not just for Catholics once again. There's been a lot of these apparitions have not been in Catholic churches at all. And some of the messages that have been relayed from the Virgin Mary have been that her whole effort is not just to get the Catholic group out there, but to mankind in general. And in other words, that's ecumenical message. So, at any rate, that said, why don't we advance this just a bit? Technical team working on that. That's that. That's the book.
That's cool.
I was going to show you a picture. Okay, but that's my favorite quote on this. That's from a Catholic saint. I think that is her purpose, is a messenger for God. See, a lot of people that are not Catholics will say, well, that's just some kind of paganism or something like that. But there's a lot written about Mary in the Bible. And, you know, in John it says, you know, Jesus says, this is your mother, meaning Mary to the apostles and stuff, and by extension ourselves. In other words, she has a position laid out for her. And that's my favorite quote. Go ahead and advance it, guys. Yeah, see, I'm an old, I guess we're looking for the photo. There we go. Thanks. See, that photo there is from Our Lady of Knock Shrine. That's on the back of the book here. And being an old Irishman, that has some importance to me. And this was, see all those crutches that are up against the wall? Those are just some of the crutches that were left by pilgrims to the shrine that had an actual miraculous healing. They have a medical bureau that examines the claims of healings, and it's well done. I mean, like I say, it's not just, you know, Joe Blow says he had a healing, so okay, fine, we'll write that in as a proof phenomenon. It's not. The Catholic Church is pretty meticulous in the way it reviews these. And
where is this at?
This is in Knock, Ireland. This happened about 1850s or so. No, it's 1870s. And they've had continuous healings at the shrine for all this time. Now, that's not one of the more commonly known apparitional sites, but I thought I'd throw that in there to promote the home team. Go ahead and advance it. Now, you know, Lourdes is probably one that you're familiar with as far as apparitional events. Now, basically what happened was Virgin Mary appeared to Bernadette, who was what they call the seers. The witnesses are called seers in the church. And, you know, you could see, for example, in the book or somewhere else that, you know, Lourdes has had thousands, this was cures like we just referred to at Knock. Lourdes has had thousands and thousands of alleged cures that have come from pilgrimages. Now, yes, you could say a certain amount can be allocated to people who are going to get better anyway. They just happen to get better right at the time they visit the shrine. Now, that could be. But a lot of them have also been very well documented that there's no way someone can come back from like visual impairment, things of that nature. That the people would have just walked on out of there and been crippled for the whole duration of their life. So, I mean, in other words, it would defy medical explanation. And talking about defying medical explanation, that's why I threw this photo in here, is Bernadette died, it was in the 1870s. And her body was exhumed somewhere around 1910. And then it was exhumed later. This body, this is Bernadette right here. This is taken from the Cathedral of Nevers, France. she's in a glass case to this day. In other words, there's a little bit of wax on her face because it was discolored. I mean, in other words, this is not a mummified individual, and it's not a plaster mask. This is her face. What I'm saying, in essence, she has not deteriorated in 100 and some years. You say, oh, you're crazy. No, I'm not. I mean, you could, if you were at Nevers, France today, you could see that that is her body right now. There's a whole series of these events. There's a book by a lady named Joanne Cruz. It was written in 1977, and it delineates over 100 of these incorruptibles, they're called. And
This is how long after she died?
well, this is current. This is current. I mean, she died in the 1870s. That's her right now. I mean, I know it sounds like hard to grasp, but it's true. And like I say, there's a little wax on her face like this to cover up the discoloration, but she is not deteriorating. And these and many other phenomena have been covered in the book, and what we're talking about is something that's hardcore miraculous. And if I could divert just a minute, is in the face of this, I mean, I like other people interested in ghosts and things like that, but this has got so much more hardcore scientific proof than ghosts or, not like I say, I'm a UFO guy too, but what I'm saying is this is hardcore stuff. We don't have an alien. We can say there's the alien right there. But I do have an incorruptible, and that is one of them. Anyway, I thought that would be interesting.
What do they say about her? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, what do they say about her? Why she's not deteriorating? Has she been examined? Or they
Yes,
keep
yes.
her-
The body has, instead of rigor mortis, making the body like a real stiff, brick-like figure. She's supple. You can take a wrist and go like that. Yeah, and that's so there's some unique qualities to it. But like I say, there's nothing phony to it at all. There's been over 100 of these guys.
Was she professionally embalmed?
No, she was not. She was not professional.
So she doesn't have rigor mortis. And her body hasn't dried out.
Like I say, the only thing unusual about her, if she was right here on the deck, the only thing unusual about her is there's a little discoloration on her face.
And there's no odor that comes from that?
No, as a matter of fact. Well, not so much that with her, but other Catholic saints who have experienced this, where who they've noticed this phenomenon associated with, there's been an odor of sanctity that I described that is roses, yes. Roses, hibiscus, that kind of flower. Or very strong aromatic smells. And this has happened over and over and over again. I mean, it's not like a last week phenomenon. This has been going on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. All the way back.
Did you see this body yourself?
No, but you can see this. But this is right off the internet. I mean, and her body is on display, and thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of people have seen this body. Yes.
Is her body in an airtight kind of place?
It is. It's in a glass enclosed situation in the cathedral.
I think there's another saint nun that's in Italy also.
There's many of them.
Yeah, and I've seen her. And I was surprised. I didn't know, that's real. And I knew it wasn't a doll.
Right, right. Well, now she's the best appearing of the group I've seen. But there was another one, and his name's a real mouth breaker. It's Charbul. He was a Russian priest, and he was dug up. His grave had actually been under water. So I mean, you figure that would just accentuate the deterioration, just like that. So I mean, this has got some real smoke and fire to it. It really does. And like you might, if you get a chance after the deal, you might look at this. It's Dr. Tim Barth. He's the head of psychology department at TCU. He's also Catholic, but he's no idiot. And he. But what I'm saying is, Barth, in he wrote forward the book. It's going to be an e-book format. It isn't in the written one here, but I just extracted some for review. He's amazed. I mean, this is so well documented. Are people blind or what? In other words, there's something that's almost like blinders come down. In other words, this is the most well authenticated of all the paranormal topics we can talk about. The monsters, the Bigfoot, the aliens, this, that. I'll beat anybody with this. if I was a defense attorney in a court, I would beat them all. I told Dory that.
Are there any in the United States?
No. Now, they just approved the only just this past week, they approved the only apparition, Our Lady of Good Help up in the Wisconsin area. This finally had received church approval. That's been the only one that's formally been approved in the U.S. But as far as like incorruptibles, no. You go ahead, defense. Okay, now this, when it shows up, will be the absolute, there it is. This is the absolute knock 'em down, biggest apparition there was as far as witnesses. And it wasn't even over a Catholic church. This was taken over St. Mark's Coptic Church in Cairo, Egypt, a little suburb of it called Zaitun. And this is off Arab television in the area between 68 and 70. We're talking millions. It's been estimated anywhere between, it's a big estimate, big range because it's Egypt, but between 2 to 14 million people saw this. They have a square right there around this church, big square, and there's like 250,000 people at some of the high school. You can see this apparition site at night. And
So it was there for a while.
this went on almost nightly for a 2-year period, from 68 through 70. And it occurred again in fall of 2009.
In the same place?
No, in another place in Cairo.
Did it just disappear?
It did. But this was seen nightly, like I say, for sometimes hours at a time. And it was animated. The Virgin Mary would interact with the crowd.
Well, Harlan's never been.
No. And I'm glad you said that. Remember, in 68, 70, you remember, we're all about the same age here, or at least older than 35 anyway. But what I'm saying is, you remember Nasser, way back then? Okay, now he was socialistic, but he wasn't really a big Muslim, no, but it was still a Muslim country. And they didn't, while they had a Coptic minority, they didn't really want anything to promote Catholicism. He sent Egyptian special forces troops a mile square around this church, door to door to door, to see if it was some form of projection or some kind of con or something like that, and it wasn't. And what I was saying, they made every effort to debunk this. Okay. And by the way, with my Protestant cronies, I'm kind of somewhat hurt by that because even the Muslims venerate the Virgin Mary. I don't know they do that. In that crowd, 250,000, even they would venerate the Virgin Mary. So it isn't like, we're trying to inflict some kind of weird doctrine on them. It's not.
You said she interacted with you?
Yes.
What'd she do?
She would nod sometimes towards them and so forth. And she'd raise her hands and stuff like that. Now, the Special Forces troops made their search, as I indicated, a mile around. But remember, this is Egypt in 1968. This is not, I don't know holographically, I guess, the U.S. government's probably got something that can do that now. But we're talking about a place that would be lucky to have gas, let alone holographic projections.
Yeah.
And this has happened again, like I say, in 2009. It's happened called Warri.
Is there any correlation between world events at those two particular times that you can kind of say?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, there is. Now this is right after the war with Israel and Egypt, the '67 war. And one of the important things about the Virgin Mary's appearances has been a very pivotal thing. Has been that her timing is very important. Like a lot of times in France, she'd show up just as the Germans were ready to attack, or in this case, I think it was maybe to chill out the population after so much friction, so they maybe wouldn't go back to war again. Sometimes she came with prophetic messages. At Fatima, she came and was warning of the onset of the Russian Revolution and communism and so forth. So, yes, I think that was the reason she came, basically to chill the waters out in that country at that time. Because this was a big issue. I mean, you got to remember, Egypt's not a very big country, and this was focused the whole national attention right on that. There were Vatican observers there too, but basically, Nasser, who I mentioned earlier, he even issued a statement saying this is valid. Even he did. Now, I guess, You know, anybody, I was told a long time ago by a publisher that Kevin, just because it interests you doesn't mean it interests everybody else. I know all that. But, I mean, I'm one of you from the standpoint of being interested in phenomenology. And I'm saying this is the granddaddy of them all. So much to grab you by the throat. If you don't look at this, you're just crazy. And it strikes me that, you know, this is, like that's what Barth said, he's surprised us and talked about every day. Like I say, this happened in 2009, the fall 2009, just a year ago. And did you hear about it on CBS News?
Kevin, one other question. Here, knock, Lords, does anybody ever run the ley lines? Are they all interconnected anywhere or anything?
I don't know. I really don't know. The bulk, well, I'll say the bulk, but a lot of the apparitions have happened in France. But I think that was mostly because France was in many years past a pivotal nation in Europe. You know, the wars always started there. Also, France was a very big Catholic country. For whatever reason, France was a major issue. Well, I know. Well, that's true. But this, without question, without fail, is the blockbuster of all apparitions. And I guarantee you this. I go to, you probably know this church here from Keller, St. Elizabeth Annecy, off the road down there.
Sure, it's real close to
That's where I go to church, and it's got 26,000 members. I've been in meetings with those people. I guarantee there's one out of 1,000 Catholics down there that would know about this. I told them what you're talking about. But that's true. So, I mean, like I said, this is a hidden phenomenon in plain sight or something. And of all the stuff I hear, like I listen to Coast to Coast all the time, this has got to beat any day.
Coptic branch have anything, do you think, to do with it?
Oh, wow, I'm sorry, what?
Does Coptic connection have anything to do with it, you think?
I don't think so much as I think that it was a deal with the pivotal timing as far as trying to chill the population out.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. There's been some other Eastern Orthodox.
Did anyone get real close to this apparition, or get a ladder, get up there?
No, they didn't really do that. They just basically photographed it. They didn't really chase it down.
Did anyone take a shield and move it all the way around the apparition to see if it was being
Projection. Not to my knowledge, but they may have. I mean, they did everything possible they could do. They probably did. I mean, they said, like I say, they went to block door-to-door search for a mile. I'm sure they did everything sensible.
So,
Did anyone go in,
Go ahead.
in that little room up there to see if they could see?
Yes.
That it? That would be very impressive.
There's nothing, absolutely, I promise you, there's nothing to debunk it, nothing. And they had every intention to debunk it because of the...
now if you, here we only see a glowing image. If
Right.
you were up close, could you see any detailed surface features?
To my knowledge, not any much more than that. Now there were, see those that above her head? There were doves that would show up sometimes before the apparitional figure.
that was part of the church.
I don't know.
That I don't know.
Well, with the pictures that people took from different angles, did they look any different? Did she
No,
have-
I mean, this is basically representative of the look. I mean, yes, it was photo endless and endless and endless times, yeah.
But they didn't look any different.
No. I mean, millions of photos.
No video? I mean, I know they had.
They did, but I don't think it, I mean, it was photo, I mean, Egyptian television would be down there on the scene, I guess that's photo video. That is from video on Egyptian television.
So if I wanted to find this on the net, what would I do? Virgin Mary apparition?
So, yes, Zeitun, Zeitoun, Egypt.
It was a similar, I think, if my memory serves me, in Medjugorje.
Medjugorje?
Yeah.
Well, similar, but not, well,
I don't know that it was that extensive, that long. I just
no, it really wasn't seen by that many people. This is the only one that's ever been seen by this many people, and in modern times. Now, Medjugorje is still ongoing, but there's a question mark on Medjugorje about the validity of it. I'm not saying it isn't, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, they haven't really had a ruling on it. My impression is it is, but this is.
The Catholic President did a lot of stacker documentation, or I would documentation, a lot of write-up on it, pictures and whatnot. He was good impressed with him.
Right. Well, I'm not
impressed.
the one to say, but I mean, the churches has a commission right now that's trying to get to the bottom of Medjugorje to make pronouncement on it. But this goes on for years.
Yeah, I
before
know
we get
they're
around
very
to
careful.
this. Go
Did the
ahead,
Roman
Nancy.
Church approve this?
The Roman Church has not disapproved. They had Vatican observers. What they did is, well, they basically just had Vatican observers and they just acknowledged that it existed. See, the Coptic Church, which was the church in control of this area, they basically, yes, they did approve. But the Roman Church basically didn't because it wasn't in their ballgame. Okay, now this, talk about Medjugorje, one time and everything right. On the front of the book has that picture, and that's this picture. This was given to me by a lady in that church I mentioned, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and she was on a pilgrimage to Medjugorje, and one of her friends was the companion with her, and her companion took a picture of this hill, and this hill was where the original apparition was seen by, the original seers. And this image appeared on the photo. And you say, well, Kevin, you're voting. No, I'm not saying. Because, in other words, this is in this woman's office in St. Elizabeth's. She's just a regular church worker. She's the wife of a deacon that works there for 14 years. I mean, she's not making any money by hustling this picture. I mean, they just knew I was writing this book, so it would fit in with my documents. And, in other words, that image where you can see facial features, lips, all this, where?
Where?
Top center.
Top side.
Oh, way up at the top.
Right, right.
At the bottom.
And you can see basically a veil or kind of like a gown kind of thing. It's more distinct probably in this issue. You can see it clearer on the front of it. But in other words, this picture is what it is. It is a miraculous image. Nobody's making any money. I mean, her companion on Medjugorje wasn't selling these pictures or anything like that. Go ahead.
I found it.
Oh, I saw it. I see it right there. Yeah. But so this is, to me, in finding this, to me it was kind of a little corroboration that I was on the right path. It's not everybody's brother can find one just like this. Go ahead and advance. Trouble with Medjugorje to a certain extent. Hey guys. Is that it's been going on for 30 years. It's the only one that's ever gone on quite that long. And there's a little bit of question as to whether it's valid. So in other words, just by other experience, they've never had one last this duration. They're wondering if maybe people are pumping it up for entrepreneurial reasons, business reasons. I don't know. But I mean, I'm not going to say that. And even if they were, that doesn't mean the original batch of apparitions weren't valid anyway. I mean, maybe the poor little people there are trying to extend it to sell more stuff to tourists, but that doesn't, I think you get the idea. But now this, everybody here has probably heard of Fatima, right? Fatima. The apparition of Fatima, that occurred in 1917. These are the three children there, Lucia, Jacinto, and Francisco, that were the seers. Now here again, this is another one. Not maybe as grand and glorious as the 2 million that saw this Ituna apparition, but 100,000 people at the culmination of this apparition, 100,000 people had gathered in October of 1917 to see this, what was supposed to be her last apparition, and she was supposed to have a miracle that occurred at that time for proof reasons, and it did happen. Out of that 100,000, there was many, many people that were there to debunk it. Because there's another aspect of critical timing in this. Some of the messages given to the seers were, for example, that Russia would have what was called errors. Speaking about the rise of communism, clearly. But I mean, these kids didn't even know what Russian was, man. I mean, in other words, for them to have this information was really bizarre itself. I mean, they could barely probably spell Russian, let alone know where it was or know that there was such a thing as communism. And even in 1917, what was it? They still had the white Russian government in power anyway. I mean, Lenin didn't take power until later on. So what I'm saying is, the messages that were given these kids could not have come from a normal basis. They talked about another greater war. You see, this was during World War I, yes, and Portugal did have some input into it. But the messages given to these little kids was also there would be even greater war, that is, of course, World War II, that would come there after that. Whereas at the time, World War I, they thought once this was over, this would be the war to end all wars. That was the thinking process at the time. So I'm saying here again is another form of proof. That's pretty good. I mean, you know, poor little peasant children coming up with the rise of communism. Good luck, somebody coming up with that to debunk that. But here, let's go past it. She might have included that. Yeah, okay, this is what I was looking for. Okay. See all those people? There's 100,000 people that were there for the culminating event to Fathom. And that was where they had to dance with the sun and all this unusual aerial phenomenon. And, well, there's a lot of weird things happening to this. The Portuguese government at the time had basically a socialist atheistic approach to things because they blamed the Catholic Church, rightly or wrongly, who knows, but they blamed the Catholic Church for basically underscoring the status quo among the people, saying basically the elite keeps you down with the help of the Catholic Church, that sort of thing. They're using the church as a whipping boy from there. And in any case, the government in Portugal was antagonistic to the Catholic Church. So here again, like the Zaytun apparition, there was every reason for the powers that be to try to puncture this validity of this. Okay, there were lots of journalists sent by the government in here to debunk this apparition specifically. Couldn't do it. Never heard the first story about it being debunked. As a matter of fact, you heard conversion stories about these people being in the crowd, seeing miraculous events, and say, okay, I'm in. I mean, and that's exactly what happened. And I'll stand with anybody, anywhere, any place, any skeptic guy like Michael Schroeder, anybody, and I'll beat them all. This is real. And then 100,000 people saw this. They were soaking wet from being in the rain waiting for this. After the little dance and something, they were dry. Now, how's that happen? Doesn't happen. Anyway, go ahead and dance and test. Well, that's this. That we don't. Yeah, it's not a picture. Well, that's what you want to picture. Oh, okay. That's all right. That's all right. Okay, that's all right. There's problems in our technical department here, not with Lynn, but with me. My secretary didn't include enough pictures. But that's okay, that's okay. We saw the important ones. There's another one I've got that's very telling, and I don't even have one in the book, but you've probably seen images in the back of a lot of Latin people who have Our Lady of Guadalupe. The picture on the back of their trucks, they have a lot. Now this is a powerful, powerful apparition. This happened in 1513. And what happened was, a Mexican peasant was walking on Tepeyac Hill, which is kind of near the site of the current Mexico City. And he ran across the apparition of the Virgin Mary. And she basically gave him a mission to go to the local Catholic bishop and tell him she wanted a chapel built in that area. And he did. He made an effort to go see the bishop, and the bishop basically patted him on the head and said, well, thank you. I'm glad you saw the Virgin Mary at the door. Thank you. If you come back with something proof-wise, we'll talk about the bishop. The Mexican, and he did go back. And he said, I need proof. I mean, I don't believe me. I'm just a peasant. Well, here's what happened. That image, like you saw the Virgin Guadalupe on the back of these trucks and so forth. What she did is she put Castilian roses in this guy, Juan Diego's garment. This was a cactus husk garment. I mean, fragile. Cactus husks can be like fragile, like corn husks, just nothing. This is still in existence, by the way, in the Basilica of Guadalupe today. Today. If you and I took some cactus husks, threw them in the closet, left, come back 20 years, there's dust. There's an image on there. Okay. The image you see is still in exact form today. Okay. You can even look that up on your cell phone and find it. But what I'm saying is, she put these Castilian roses in this guy's garment. He kind of, pulled them around himself, and he presented them to the bishop, as proof. This was December of that year, and it was cold in Mexico City. It's fairly high elevation, so there's no way roses would be growing naturally. And no way for this Indian to have them. Okay. And not only that, they were Castilian roses of a variety that the bishop of Mexico City was familiar with from his hometown, Spain. I mean, that's getting pretty clear cut here. And now back to the image, because it is the most miraculous image. It beats the Shroud of Turin as far as the amount of study and accessibility for studies he's had. I know they studied the shot for yeah, but the studies on this far supersedes. Okay. As I indicated, it happened in 1513. They've had little particles taken from the shroud and examined by Sandia Labs engineers. There's no tracing. There's no pit. My ex-wife, she's an artist, and she said you can't have a painting without, you know, some kind of tracing or whatever. And certainly you can't have a painting. I'm no artist, but you can't have a tracing without pigment or a painting without pigment. In other words, this cactus husk, fragile garden, has been in constant church custody since 1513. It's still on display and it has deteriorated. And it's been exposed to all kinds of environmental issues, smoke, water, humidity itself, just age, dryness. And it's only been under glass the last 150 years. Still in pristine condition. Now, how's that possible? Does that happen anywhere else in our experience? No. Cars get faded out in paint after, 5 years? That's with modern techniques. Not only that, it gets further than that. It's more complex, more sophisticated than that. Okay, in this image, like on the back of those trucks, her eye, they've had electron microscopes, and they've looked at her eye, not electron microscopes, regular microscopes, they've looked at her eyes and gotten a real close perception of the image in the Virgin Mary's eyes. And it reflects what's called the Samson-Purkinje effect, which all our eyes have curved lenses. So I would look at this chair, and the image of my eye looking at that chair would have a little curvature to it, just due to distortion effect. The image reflected in the Virgin Mary's eyes has that same Samson-Purkinje effect. There is no way that's a regular event. 20 different ophthalmologists have reviewed that. They all concur this is an unusual event. There's not a regular artist that could replicate that I know of. Nobody else knows either. This is a miraculous event, just like Bernadette, just like the picture on there. These are unusual items. Like I say, that's why if you're a phenomenologist, like I might be considered to be from early age, you have to go for this. This is hardcore stuff. And in the back of the book is a chart I got from the International Marian Research Institute. It's a group that is associated with the University of Dayton. And this deals with apparitional events just from 1900 to the present. I mean, just in this particular case. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these. And I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think that, okay, you're saying how could there be hundreds just from the last 100-some years? I think that frequency has always been there. I think it's just we have better record keeping and television, internet, and this and that. I think if you could compile all this all the way back, it would have just that. And even Catholics, I was on local Catholic radio 2 weeks ago, KATH, that's a local Catholic station, and they didn't know that. They had no idea that there was that kind of frequency to this event.
Kevin, can you take a second and take it the last step where this poor peon was beatified and he's now saint something with it? Which is a part of all of this, is it not?
Well, only tangentially, not really. I mean, he's been, yes, canonized as saint. But as far as the actual events leading up to him getting sainthood,
It's not happened years later.
yeah, many years later, all it is. But in other words, basically after Juan Diego did his input with the bishop, he was basically out of the picture. He didn't have any pivotal things. Now, I will say this. Talk about George Norrie and UFOs and all that. During the 3 hours I was on Norrie, every half hour he'd take another poke at me about, well, this is UFO related, this is UFO related, because he thought Fatima was UFO related. And I don't think it is. I mean, he said, well, how can you be a UFO man, which you knew I was, how can you be a UFO man and then still say this is true? Well, I said to Norrie, basically, I don't see them as being mutually exclusive. I mean, I said, yeah, really, because he said that, I said, look, I think there are UFOs. He said, well, how do you fit them in the picture? I said, well, I view them as part of the landscape. In other words, there's horses, and there's cows, and there's UFOs, there's aliens. I mean, you'd have to be mentally retarded to think there aren't UFOs. I mean, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but I mean, really, I mean, the best one I saw, it's too bad we can't get her, because she was much better than her husband. Richard Dolan, of course, you're familiar with him. his wife Karen Dolan gave us a little presentation up there in Roswell, and she had cave paintings where they had UFOs in the background, and were like little Jetson-y looking vehicles. And cave paintings in the Pyrenees Mountains in France they know are 6,000 years old. And these were like little Jetson-y looking one-man passenger pods or something. Now there's no way that there's something bizarre to that. Cavemen aren't going to design that. But, so back to the Nori thing, yes, I know there's UFOs. But what Nori didn't mention, or I might have mentioned Nori, went right past it, is that the Bible even mentions it in Genesis chapter 6 about the Watchers. Now, some people have assigned the identity of the Watchers as being spiritual beings, that is, demonic, whatever, or some form that's not human, of course. Yes, it was obviously the way the Bible's written, it was some form that's not human. They came to earth and found the daughters of men fair, got married and all that stuff. Whatever. But what I'm saying is, I think the Watchers were aliens. But I think, you know, and being also a UFO guy instead of just a religious guy, I think we're also, like Valet has stressed, I think we're talking about interdimensional quality to a lot of this anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just because doesn't mean just because they're aliens they have to be the fourth planet over. They could be from some other dimension. And even in the book I mentioned here, like Michio Kaku, the current physicist, I mean, he's talking about what, either 11 or 25 different dimensions, depending on which one you listen to, which one you want. Yeah, I think that yes, that exists parallel to this. But so in other words, spiritual dash alien, who knows what? It's kind of a murky little area here. But yes, in other words, back to the Nori thing, the Bible does mention that there were some other creatures here, be they aliens or be they spiritual beings. And the Bible doesn't disregard that. As a matter of fact, Jesus came back, and when he was talking to his disciples, after he was resurrected, he said, I go to prepare a place for you. My Father's house has many mansions, I go to prepare a place for you. Well, I mean, that always stuck with me, because, I mean, he's saying, my Father's house has many mansions. We've tried to say there's other dimensions, other circumstances, realms, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. What else could it be but there's aliens and something else already existing in whatever mansions there is? I mean, you have to be bone dead stupid not to see that, you know. So, but maybe that's just me. But I mean, to me, it seems clear. But if you believe the whole thing, like there's certain evangelical preachers that could say, I'm some kind of whack job. Well, yeah, but we got evidence here for the wackiness. And I think it's very good. In other words, I think the whole concept of aliens is very good. It is corroborated by that. Nothing to be afraid of. As a matter of fact, I was just looking at Linda Moulton Howe's website last night. And one of the little blurbs in there was that they decided now there's 300 sextillion stars. In other words, 20 or 30 times more than they had originally thought. But just recently, I guess, the latest telescopes, latest whatever, has shown 20 or 30 times what they thought. Now, you have to be kind of egocentric to think this is the only planet that life on Earth. You know, God's going to develop all that just for us. I mean, this is kind of silly. Anyhow, anyway, Nori tried that every half hour or so, and it get kind of irksome. And I finally said, look, man, I mean, you've got proofs, you've got prophecies, you've got miraculous cures, you've got physical evidence. I said, an awful lot of the aliens to be promoting this. And if they weren't promoting it, what would the aliens' motive be? Well, let's see, we're going to come back for 2,000 years to try to promote Catholicism? Why? I mean, that's so weak, it's silly. So at any rate, the two phenomena exist parallel, and I don't see any contradiction between like both issues. As a matter of fact, what hurt me a little bit about Nori is they have a priest on there, Lionel Fanthorpe, that's on a lot. And he's an Anglican priest, similar to what we are. And he was head of the British UFO Association. So, I mean, he didn't give him a blast. But,
What was his name?
Lionel Fanthorpe.
Fan?
Fan, F-A-N, like fan. You know, he's pretty, he has written hundreds of books, but he, like I say, he was head of the British UFO Organization. And like I say, I don't see any contradiction here, but this to me is a reassuring. It's a reassuring. But basically, the messages have been very positive, very conventional. There have been some warnings, like there were about Russia and stuff like that, but the bulk of them have been basic messages that you would anticipate.
Does your Vatican person who made the announcement about believing in UFOs? Have you ever heard him express anything about what we're talking about?
Well, the Vatican, in essence, does believe that the Virgin Mary's been appearing over these many years. The first apparition dates all the way back to 40 AD. But the same people talk about different, I mean, there's different people with different categories. But obviously, they do things very carefully. Like say, yes, I'm a Catholic, but I see flaws in the way the Catholics do things. I'm not a perfect organization, but they are very cautious in what they do. And by these little statements they've had, like the head of the Vatican Observatory and say this, and then they make comments, the aliens be our space brothers, if you will. They're kind of like walking up to the water without sticking their toe in, and kind of admitting that there are aliens. And that's their way of showing people out in case one showed up. But there's no telling when the government, if it ever will, release information about that. But I think there has been a change over 20 years. I think there has. I think the public in general, if we had the same thing presented to people 20 years ago, they probably would be a little resistant to the information. I don't think anybody with a brain is resistant to UFOs now. But I contend that this is more proven than the UFO thing any day. So at any rate, let me answer any questions you might have on this. Go ahead.
What did some of the other, like the Anglican preacher, what did he say about this sort of thing?
Oh, he'd be a concurrence with that. See, originally I went to Episcopal High School. I graduated from that in Maryland, and it was kind of they admitted that there was some truth to Catholicism, and you'd hear little snippets about Fatima, Lourdes. That's how I started hearing about it when I was younger. But like I say, I have a couple chapters in the book about Eastern Orthodox apparitions where it was Greek Orthodox.
Seems like Fatima, there's supposed to be one secret that's still being held.
Yeah, we dealt with that too.
Have you found out what it was?
Well, here again, the Vatican kind of minces around things, sometimes with good reason. I mean, I'm not, but they have said, okay, I'm going to read this to you from the back of the book, because it's like recent occurrences. Okay. Here's what it is. Okay. Now, here's a quote. They had in May of this past year, they had a meeting of what's called Fatimists, who believe there is more to the story, the third secret. They do. And they had a meeting in Rome, and there's a guy named Christopher Ferrara. He's a U.S. attorney, very good Catholic, and pretty good investigator, obviously, big U.S. attorney. He said this: the evidence points to only one conclusion, that something has to be missing. Only a minority clings steadfastly to the notion that an ambiguous vision of a bishop dressed in white outside a half-ruined city is all there is to the third secret. End quote. That's from Catholic news source. What he's saying here, to this point, is that official Vatican explanations that the third secret of Fatima was about the failed assassination attempt on the Pope in the 80s. They don't buy it because, they didn't even release this secret for 40 some years until, after Sister Lucia said it could be released. Because supposedly in 1960 was the earliest period that they wanted this released information. And that is the Virgin Mary said that she didn't want to release to them. And they kept it for 40 years, and Pope after Pope would refuse to say anything further. Well, assassination attempt, popes have been assassinated over the years and everything else. Nothing that dramatic in that. So, like Ferrara is saying, there's more to the story, and there's some indication that there's two potential explanations. One is that, for people who've had little snippets of knowledge, one is that there were some warnings about the church falling off, and maybe the child abuse issues in the church was a big event that would hit them, and maybe there were warnings about that. Or there were also, counter that, there were also some rumors that it had to do with apocalyptic events like earthquakes, things of this nature. So, big cataclysms. So, but just assassination attempt on a bike.
Kevin, staying with Fatima, what would you say if I said, well, how is that different from what Nostradamus did about World War II, or what's his name from North Carolina?
Edward Casey.
Casey.
Well-
It sounds the same issue.
The same, except things are a little more clear cut in some of this. The reason I said is I've read
Yeah.
Nostradamus' stuff, and some of it was pretty good about the Nostradamus. I think he had one about Hitler instead of Hitler. It was pretty close. And he said also Nostradamus said something effective about Montgolfier in France having the first hot air balloon, and this was like several hundred years before Montgolfier lived. So you got to give credit for that. But yeah, I mean that's true. But this is pretty clear cut. Like for example, it's not just the prophecies; it's also the visions, the physical evidence, qualities, things like that. And like I say, like the Russians, Russia having errors. I mean, this is pretty clear cut stuff. A lot of those stuff is pretty hard to get into in different ways.
An observation, one of my favorite subjects is UFOs, and you mentioned that. And if you notice, about 1945, 1946, when we started playing with nuclear weapons, we started getting a lot of, and it occurs to me, you know, Einstein has an equation that as you take a small particle and you accelerate it toward the speed of light, its mass becomes infinite, theoretically. So when you explode a nuclear bomb, and in an ordinary explosion, particles move apart rapidly, but they don't approach the speed of light. One of the things that happens in a nuclear explosion, those particles begin to reach a percent of the speed of light as they fall apart. That makes that a interdimensional warp. People in other dimensions heard that bomb go off.
I've heard of that. I've heard of
And
that.
they came to see about it.
I've heard that theory. But then again, I'm not knocking what you're saying because I've heard that theory and it's very plausible. And I surely don't know. But back to what like Karen Dolan had in her presentation. I mean, they've had UFOs showing up here 6,000 years ago on cave paintings. So I mean, that predates.
But they got real busy around 1946.
Maybe, but I contend this. Now, one thing Nori has had in his shows that I really do believe is there's a guy named Ed Grimsley he's talking about. And Ed Grimsley has the night vision goggles, and he finally talked Nori into going and looking at them. And I think there's a whole lot more going on up there than we realize. I mean, you know, I don't know Ed Grimsley from Man Next Door, but I'm just saying that they're always seeing stuff all over. And I know I've talked to, when I was on the Jerry Pittman show, he's going to release it maybe next week. He releases stuff for on-demand stuff instead of live shows. And he's been telling me he hasn't done my show and released it because he's been so busy with UFO phenomena currently. And, you know, he's had like, I mean, one of the reasons for procrastination, but he has 3 or 4 shows that he's supposed to produce and put in place. And there's been all kinds of stuff happening lately, yes, that increased activity. And that's what supposedly he has another regular show that's a live show that's just UFOs that's been sucking up all his time. He's been so busy. Ongoing events. So yes, maybe things are speeding up, but I do know that like that Karen Dolan example and others, they have a medieval painting I've seen that had I think Madonna was in there and they had a painting of a UFO in the background. That's been in a constant custody of some museum over there in Europe for 300-400 years.
How do we know there haven't been nuclear explosions that have been in civilization long before ours?
Well, in Vedic cultures, was it India?
Yeah,
They have.
Millions of years.
yeah.
Well, yeah, they have glass that was formed in the desert around there or something. It's supposedly thousands of years old, and it would take a tremendous, maybe a meteor or a nuclear explosion, one, cause that sand to fuse into glass. I don't know.
Well, you know, the reluctance of the Vatican to release the information on the third reminds me very much of our government, all governments reluctant to release the information on UFOs.
Well, yeah.
I mean, the third secret from the Vatican.
Right. Well, I do believe, from what I know of them, they have a lot more knowledge than you think they do.
Yeah.
Because remember, if you want to think just this way, look at all the schools they control all over the world, and scholars. You know, if there's something to tell the Pope, you tell him. I mean, I think they have a source of a lot of information. You know. And remember, there was another guy, he used to go to a lot of UFO conferences. He's interviewed on Coast to Coast a lot with Paula Harris. Monsignor Corrado Balducci was like basically the Vatican's point man. He was supposedly retired Monsignor, but he lived at the Vatican, but he was de facto contact man between the Vatican and UFO groups. He went to, up until recent times, until he died, he was at all the conferences. So they have had an interest.
Isn't there some conversation I heard like 4 or 5 years ago that Vatican owns a place out in
Tucson?
Tucson or something for looking at the
Observatory.
Yeah, observatory.
Well,
And
that's
one of the
true.
reasons they were interested in that is they were wanting to see what was going on.
Well, they were, because you got to also remember, they already have an observatory in Rome. So you figure, why would they have to have another one, you know?
Right.
I guess it was to see the southern sky better or something like that. But they went through a lot of political maneuverings to get it done.
Yeah,
They
right.
did.
Do they still have it?
Yes.
Did they ever put out any print of what they found?
No. Well, I mean, they may. I mean, they haven't said anything about UFOs, but
Yeah.
there have been quotes by the guy that runs it that say positive towards there being UFOs.
You know, there's a reluctance of people to tell you everything they know, not on some, but they don't want to tell you everything they know. You know, people, they don't want you to know what they got in their back. The ranchers around here don't want to tell you how many they got in their herd or something.
Oh, I know.
But that's just a natural thing. And,
It is, but, you know, it is, and it's irksome, but something like this,
well, I'm just trying to explain what we might not know. It's not.
I know, well, it's indeterminate. But I do think, and this just, I just base that on guesswork. Like, for example, this guy that's the U.S. attorney here. I mean, I agree with him. There had to be more than third secret than just an assassination attempt, because that's happened over the years. That's not that frightening to humanity. I mean, the guy made it through, didn't he? So, no, I think it's apocalyptic events that were foretold. But any other questions?
I was just going to make a comment first about something he had said. There's a few claims that biblical locations such as Sodom and Gomorrah have been, the sediment layers have been completely vitrified due to atomic activity.
Oh, yeah, I have heard that. I have heard that. The theoretical location for Sodom and Gomorrah, I have heard it was, like I say, sand turned into glass kind of thing.
And as you said, Vedic India as well.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Though I was going to see how you felt about the idea of apparitions becoming manifest through the masses becoming more consciously aware of such events or incidents.
Well, that's plausible. It's kind of like, I think more ghosts are being seen these days because people are snapping the validity of ghosts. When I grew up, the common thing was to say there's no such thing as ghosts. Well, you know, Jesus even spoke of ghosts, okay, in the Bible. They're ghosts. They just are ghosts. I've seen a ghost.
Tell us about the ghost you saw.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you.
Well, you stepped in that one, didn't you?
I don't mind. My business partner was, he's kind of like Cato Caitlin, remember from O.J. Simpson? He's a nice guy. But he was rooming with me till he got married here a few years back, and it was a Friday night. Usually we did our running around shenanigans on Saturday, and Friday was, you know, just hang around it. And I'd fallen asleep in the living room with a book on my chest. And he was watching television in the living room. He'd fall asleep on the sofa. And he said, "Holy wank." And I looked up, and I thought, see, we're two single guys living in West Fort Worth, and I thought that the way the apartment was arranged was like New Orleans style, where it's all facing inward in a courtyard kind of thing. And there was a walkway. And I thought what had happened is someone had walked in to the room that was unlocked, you know, some drunk or whatnot. Or, contrary to that, he had a buddy that was always crying on his shoulder about old Brenda was doing this, or old Brenda was doing that, or something, some falling out. Now, in other words, that was the first initial thought. And when he said, "Holy blank," he didn't say, "Kevin, there is a ghost." He just said that exclamation, and I looked up and saw a little Casper the Ghost, little dumpy looking ghost. And he and I saw it, though it lasted about 3 seconds. And, but it was not a shadow, like a shadow coming off the blinds or anything like that. It was a freestanding thing about this far away from the door, and it was like a little 5'5" little dumpy ghost. And it had like a misty look in the middle, and on the outskirts it was like charcoal gray. It was definitely not a shadow. And there's a corollary to the story, is this guy's also an obsessive compulsive kind of guy. If you're back from The Odd Couple, like Felix Unger kind of guy, that's what he was like. I mean, everything's got to be just. And his mother gave him one of these $10 candlestick holders. It was made of glass, big old wide thing, big old heavy duty candle he burned out. But a 2-pound thing. And what he would do is he would shove it up against the wall in his dresser just to make sure it was flush with the wall every day. And this guy was not effeminate, he's a big ladies' man, but I mean, he's just kind of a neat freak, He's a guy to live with. But it became a talking point because what would happen is this glass vase or holder would move across the table 3 or 4 inches at a time. I mean, during the course of the day, we didn't see it move, it would do it. And it became a talking point between us. As he'd go to work with me a lot because we'd make sales calls a lot the same day. And I said, well, it moved today. Yes, no, whatever. 3 days out of 5, it would move around the desk. And now we were in the Carswell flight path, and I thought, well, maybe it's associated with vibration, but no, come on. I broke my leg in 2002. And I was laid up for about 4 months. And I was there during many overflights, exercises, and nothing ever moved like that. Pictures had come off the wall before that would happen. Besides, you have a little bunch of pens, a little array like a fan. They'd have arranged like that. And if it would move this thing that was 2 pounds, it would certainly disperse the pens. Nothing happened like that. So this was what it was. But what I'm getting at is, after we saw the ghost, the other phenomenology about the little vase never happened again. It's kind of like ghosts saying, guys, this is all you got to haunt, I'm out of here. Greener pastures, probably.
What was on the property before you?
Oh, just,
before your house?
no, not that, it's been in existence over there since late 70s, early 80s, just an apartment complex. Warren Terrace, just a place what Lockheed engineers saying around.
One other question. In talking about ghosts, do you think it's possible for someone to see a ghost and it looks so much like a regular, everyday person that they don't even know it's a ghost?
I've heard of it. I've read of it. But what I saw, you never figured
Because I get that happen to me and an ordinary person walked through a door.
I've heard of that. I've heard of it. I mean, it's stuff I've read over the years.
And I still don't believe I saw him walk through the door.
I know what you're saying. Well, like, remember when we opened this up, I talked about the Ernest Borgnine thing and the Ghost of Flight 401 and all that. The guy that what it was, Borgnine played the navigator that kept haunting these Eastern Airlines flights.
Yeah.
And people would actually talk to him, just like you're talking to anybody else, and they think it was just old so-and-so. They wouldn't, in other words, till later, they wouldn't know the guy was a deceased spirit or whatever. But, so I've heard of such things. What I saw looked very much Casper the Ghost.
Well, I understand that, I read the book that preceded the movie, I guess.
Yeah.
Usually the way it goes. And there are several incidents, and the logs are not available for that time period on that. And there's a follow-up story that they took the galley out and some of the stuff out of the kitchen that made it through that flight. And reused it.
They cannibalized parts.
Yeah, and then one of them, all the engines quit on one that I think it landed safely, but they checked it out, it had parts on it.
If I recall correctly, there were several parts that Eastern
Well, yeah, it was a
cannibalized.
lot of, I was just, I remember that one there, if it was usable, maybe.
But basically, the ones that were cannibalized and had cannibalized parts of them had hauntings.
You two guys would spend about 50 cents more and get the good stuff instead of the rot gut. I wouldn't be having that.
I'm happy I drank Coast Mills Irish whiskey, and that's.
Well, it occurs to me the ghosts may be people and we're ghosts. Your point of
It's
view.
very possible it could be dimensional bleed over. It's just, I don't know. But there was no drinking during the ghost incident.
Now.
At any rate, I enjoyed it. Certainly the book's available.
Thank you.
Thank you.